All right, today we are in Tampa, Florida, speaking with Lucas Heater. He is a valuation specialist with Colliers International. He's on the hospitality team. So he holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Political Science from the University of Washington. Mr. Heater joined Colliers International Valuation Advisory Services in 2014 and has been involved in the practice of real estate since 2005, where he came from CBRE as a senior appraiser. Let's see, he has a broad range of experience across all property types: retail, office, gas station, multifamily, industrial. That was all at CBRE, but when he joined Colliers, he joined the hospitality team. He's been evaluating hotels in South Florida, throughout the state of Florida ever since. All right, Lucas, thanks for having us today. That's what I'd like to say first. Thanks for taking your time, busy schedule, and talking to our class here at FIU on investment analysis. I do have 3 questions to start it off with, just 3 questions that I always ask everyone. And so, first one is, what does investment analysis mean to you?
Investment analysis to me, there's in appraisal, there's a couple different ways you can look at it. Sometimes you're given a specific set of parameters to how you're supposed to look at a property. Typically, that's not something I do. I'm looking at something from how would the market analyze a certain property type, which means not necessarily looking at your specific criteria of your investment needs, but rather how everybody's going to be looking at it. So that involves analyzing your operating statements, how do they compare to the market, analyzing your rental income, your business income, however it may be. So for me, while some may look at it specifically from a very specific investment guidelines of this is what I'm looking to get out of the property, I'm trying to look at it from a standpoint of, hey, how is everybody else going to look at this thing? It's not just about your specific needs, but the market in general. So for me, that's what investment analysis is.
So more of a macro look.
Right, correct.
What advice would you give a student starting their career or wanting to come into, interested in an analyst career in hospitality, or what would you say to that student?
It's kind of a tough question for me because I wasn't someone who ever had the intention of going into real estate. I went to school, as you heard, for political science. My intention was to go to law school, which I didn't do, obviously. And I happened to meet someone and know someone who was in real estate, and at the time it was 2005 and the market was hot, and it was very lucrative. It was an opportunity to make good money, and I've always kind of been a math head, so it's something that kind of worked and fit for me. So I didn't have to necessarily do the internship role. However, I do have friends in the industry who, while they were in school, they reached out they may have had a friend who was an entry-level analyst, and they got in the door with a regional head or an MAI of some type of appraisal institute member, and they were able to get their foot in the door that way. But from a basic standpoint, I mean, just reaching out to if it's a residential appraiser or a commercial appraisal group, and if you can internship, that's probably your best bet. But other than that, I wouldn't know, because that's not necessarily the path I took.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're basically just getting out there and talking and networking with people and seeing where you fit.
It's the same way of doing anything else these days, is that a lot of it's who you know. I mean, it used to be when I started, an appraiser could have as many trainees as they wanted, and quite a while back they limited that to then you could only have 3 trainees. Well, then obviously you cut down a lot of trainees, and it kind of thinned the herd, so to speak. So, but there's still lots of appraisers out there that are looking for trainees, people that they'll bring up and mentor through the process. So it's just a matter of finding those professionals and
digging them out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So if one of our students or someone that sees the video or takes the class, if they want to contact you, is that okay with you?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Perfect. So what's going on in Florida right now? I mean, what are you up to? What are you working on?
I work all over the southeast. A lot of it is in Florida. Transactions, it's not necessarily transaction based. There's a lot of new development, so you're talking about new development, rehab development projects, things like that. With the way the market has gone, you had the the lull coming out of the recession and 2014, 2015, when I first started getting into things, you had slower transactions just because the metrics weren't as good. I mean, obviously nobody was buying into hotels because they were afraid of where they were going. Well, 2015 and even 2016, at least in Florida, everything went through the roof. You had ADRs increasing significantly. You had occupancy rebounding significantly. You had RevPAR growth that was double digits. I mean, it's very large RevPAR growth. Well, now, during that time, obviously, you had everybody wanting to get in the market, so you saw a lot more transaction-based appraisals and analysis. Now, you're seeing things kind of level off, at least from the occupancy standpoint. Properties are kind of getting where they're going to be. ADR, you're still seeing that growth, but your RevPAR is not nearly what you saw a couple of years ago. So at this point, you're seeing less transactions with less demand trying to get into the market, but rather people that maybe bought earlier, they're going to sit on it for a while and see what happens with the market. So that being the case, since you're not seeing as much transaction revenue, I do a lot of work down in South Florida, actually, in the Miami Beach area, which is where we're going to be seeing the case study today, of projects that are either complete rehabs, maybe from a different property type, from a multifamily property type going over to a condominium, over to a hotel property. In this particular case, this property was nothing. It was a shell. It was completely, I mean, it was kind of a accumulation of several properties, but that presents a different set of challenges when you're dealing with a property that doesn't have a history. So it becomes a little bit more difficult to project where it's going to go, and especially in that market when you've got so much coming in. As you probably know, the South Florida, or the South Florida in general, but Miami Beach in particular.
As in supply, increase in supply.
Right, everybody wants to be there. I mean, of course you want to be there when you get, occupancies of 75 to 85%. Your ADR is.
Is it more flagged hotels there, or is it more independents? Or
Those are no. That's another issue, is that you're dealing with. I wouldn't say smaller investment groups, but you're not dealing with Marriotts for the most part, and Hiltons. You're dealing with smaller local owners that maybe don't operate the same way that you would typically see from a organizational standpoint. So maybe your operating history isn't going to be as clean or as upfront, let's put it.
So are the independent hotel operators looking for a better return than the flagged operators who might be more organized?
Not in my experience.
No.
I don't think there's, from an investment standpoint, and there's certainly some more safety in getting into Marriott. You have the benefit of the national reservation systems. You've got the brand name that some people will just go to an area and say, "Gosh, where do I stay? Oh, there's a Marriott. They're usually nice." Or there's a Hilton. So there certainly is an element of that in the risk, but for that particular market, because the reward is proven. I mean, there's never any question that a hotel in that particular South Beach market or Miami Beach market there's pretty good chance it's going to do pretty well, and it's going to operate well with proper management.
So you were saying, just to rewind real quick, you're saying that the big years were 15 and 16,
right,
for the transactions. So I guess the hotel industry in general lagged behind the rest of multifamily, industrial, office sectors for ramping up or getting back to those 07 through 09 numbers. I mean,
I would say that. I would say you saw the recovery for other property types earlier years than the 15 and 16 that we saw the really big boom in hospitality. So
did the hotels ever really? I saw that the national trend was like 65% occupancy.
That's a pretty good. I think in the report you'll see
in this report,
from an STR star Smith Travel Research report, nationally at this particular time it was right around that mid-60s.
And that's where it hovered, and then now it's up to where? 2018.
Well, this particular report I think ran through 16, so that's a pretty good margin or area. If you're in the mid to high 60s, that's kind of nationally where you would expect to be for an average operating hotel.
And then South Beach or South Miami, that kind of takes it to another level, huh? It's a different tier,
it's
different
a
animal.
very different market. You have properties that are easily up into the 80%. Typically, when you're dealing with a typical analysis, you start getting into that 70-75%. That's when the market isn't going to hold there, because that's when outside investors, outside developers.
That was my next question. That's when they start building, right?
They're going to start building, because that's when it's okay. This is a sweet spot. Well, when you're dealing with a place like Miami Beach, there's only so much land to go around. That's why you're seeing so much redevelopment, because it is so lucrative that it's unheard of that you would say, I'm going to take a multifamily product, which is always hot, and I'm going to turn it into a hotel. Well, I mean, you don't see that very often. Most of the time, people are going to be looking to do the opposite.
And that's what you're seeing now?
Yeah, we see a lot. I've seen in the past year.
So they'd rather have the control of the turnover nightly or weekly compared to yearly, annual, kind of with the increase, because with multifamily we can increase yearly.
Well,
right?
don't
Hotels you can RevPAR you can increase by the hour or whatever.
Yeah, these aren't necessarily Class A apartments by any means, or multifamily. They're taking older, rundown, and rather than turn them and say we're going to just make them nicer, 20, 30, 40 unit apartment properties, we're going to say no, we're going to flip them, and we can either reconfigure and maybe we can shrink the space and get more rooms out of it, or what. But they're able, with that turning and with the high occupancy, because I mean we already know that apartment occupancy is going to be in the 90s, so you've got to balance that and say, okay, if their occupancy is in the 90s, they can get this much rent. How's that compared to a hotel that maybe only operates in the 75 to 85% range, but it's getting this nightly turnover? So
one more question. How is the Airbnb affecting Florida? What have you seen, or what's your
You're
take on
seeing
it?
a lot of, again, this particular study, the report we're going to be looking at is that's directly addressed, because it did hit South Florida pretty hard. I don't remember the exact figure, but it was something crazy, like adding 20 or 30,000 room nights or something. Some competition-wise, it was pretty significant. However,
so just added supply out of nowhere.
You're adding supply.
No one's doing an analyst on that or forecasting that much rooms coming to market. No?
The funny thing is there isn't a lot of information out there as far as what the specific impact has been. What you are seeing, however, now is there's a competitive disadvantage to the hotel operators with Airbnb, because obviously they're regulated. They have room taxes. They have all these other municipal taxes that they have to pay into because they operate as a hotel. Well, Airbnb, these people rent out their room. They don't have to pay
paying
any
property
taxes.
taxes.
They're paying property taxes. They're not having to pay any of the other expenses that go along with, or regulations that go along with operating a hotel. So specifically places like Miami Beach, I believe it was last December of 16, I believe, they actually passed some laws restricting Airbnb, and that has regulated and
like completely cut off the head, or
it's not cut off the head. You're only allowed to do it in certain zones. I believe it's zones that are specifically allowed for hospitality use, and I believe then on top of it, you're still required to pay all necessary taxes, things like that. And if the biggest part about it is imposing fines, it's something like $10,000 or $20,000 per offense.
Yeah, actually, I live in a condo on the beach, and I think it was $20,000. I see it in my elevator. They talk about a $20,000 fee, and I thought that was just being, regulated through the condo association, but maybe it's the municipality.
Yeah, I mean, we're all consumers, so I mean, me personally, I've never done Airbnb. I like the security of knowing what I'm going to get, not getting somewhere and being surprised. So how that affects individual consumers, I think, varies across the board, but there's no doubt that it's had an impact on occupancy rates and even ADR as more competition is brought into each.
I wonder how they're going to start tracking that information or that data with the Airbnb.
That I'm not sure about. That I don't know. I have no experience with.
Because you would think if you were in, let's say, I mean, you do the Caribbean, right? You're South Florida Caribbean, or?
I've done a little bit in the Caribbean. I think just one project, one big project.
I mean, if you're buying a piece of dirt and you're a hotel developer, I think you would want to know, hey, what's my supply of Airbnb around me? You know?
Yeah, I think you may be able to get that information. I believe if you go to Airbnb just to be able to see how flooded the market is, but specifically, I mean, all the reports you get, all the STR reports, none of that includes Airbnb, and
Mm-hmm.
you can look at that report and say, oh, well, these are all the properties that participate in it. This is the occupancy they're running at. I mean, I guess even though it doesn't include Airbnb, that's reflecting Airbnb.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Because
Sure.
you're still seeing
Right.
that impact. It's
Sure.
like maybe in 2000, if you've got a report that goes back 10 years, maybe in 2008, you were seeing occupancy rates here, and of course you have to factor for recession, things like that. But you'll be able to see that year over year, what's going on this year. And if all else fails, like you can't point to anything else, you could.
Maybe that's what the lag of the hotel or transaction or occupancy, and maybe that's why it took so long for it to explode.
Could be.
Because it was absorbing that Airbnb little by little.
Yeah,
Whatever.
I mean, current
Speculation.
transaction. A lot of the current transaction trends have to do with uncertainty, with interest
Mm-hmm.
rates and cap rates, and where's everything going to go? Where are property values going to go? Hey, I don't want to buy now on a 6 cap, and my value here, and then have interest rates skyrocket and corresponding increases to cap rates, and all of a sudden my property's worth $1 million less. So I think uncertainty dealing with investment trends of interest rates, as well as just new supply that we talked about earlier. Particularly at the time that this report was done, brokers I'd spoken with said, hey, there's 1,000 new rooms coming to this local area in the next 2 or 3 years, or at least proposed. How many of those materialize? What's that going to do? Where's the market heading? The total impact of that is, who knows?
Cap rates today, compressing or expanding?
Expanding. Again, Miami
Year
Beach.
over year? What do you feel? What do you
Yeah,
see?
you're seeing cap rates for hospitality. You may have seen, I mean, it can vary so much. South Beach, Miami Beach, you could have easily seen things in the 5s a couple years ago. Now you could be seeing things as high as 100 basis points higher.
Yeah.
Maybe even more. It just.
And that's because ADRs are reaching where they can, so there's not much give in that.
Yeah,
There's not much
upside. It's again 2 years ago when people.
So let's renovate, and then we can have a new product, and then we can.
You're looking to generate
increase
your own
our
upside
ADR there.
rather than before you could buy into a property in 15 and everything was so hot. It's like, hey, I'm going to get double-digit RevPAR growth. We're going to get 5% occupancy bump. We're going to get 5% ADR bump, and we're going to be X for. So it's just it's a uncertainty. I mean, it's risk. I mean, it's that's what you're seeing is it's a riskier market now than it was 2 years ago. So you're seeing cap rates go up.
And they've said that we were kind of long in the tooth with the market cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And as you see, we saw a kind of decline in transaction now, so we're going into more of a, I guess, growth part of the
Mm-hmm.
cycle with the renovation part of it. What do you think? 2000. I mean, is it still going to be good for another couple of years, or are we gonna? Interest rates going up incrementally. I mean, is that? We've got a new president. He's been in for now, a year now, and so everything's kind of
Mm-hmm.
stabilizing. Is that where we are with the market?
I would consider, yes. I would consider now we're pretty stable. I certainly wouldn't go into anything thinking that, hey, we're going to get a lot of looking at things from an improving standpoint. You do have a lot more people coming late to the market, frankly, that are reactionary. That hey, we need to build this now, and well, is now really the right time? Ideally, you probably should have been building 2 years ago, so you could have a product hitting the market in early 2017, mid 2016, something like that. Personally, I'm not seeing it yet. Florida is somewhat of an insulated market, not somewhat, it really is, because of the natural advantages of the tourism. Obviously, you've got Disney, you've got all the beaches, you've got Miami, everywhere you look, it's a tourist town. So it's not like other areas that maybe don't have that same advantage. So I'm not looking at it personally like I'm worried about the bottom falling out anytime soon. Maybe on a national scale, yeah, you could probably start to worry about that with interest rates and with just you can't project the same kind of growth.
Interesting. I guess we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
You know. All right, Lucas, that's been great, man. Thank you for that intro. And class, we're going to get over to the part 2 and dig into this Oceanside hotel case study with Lucas. And so we'll see you in part 2. Lucas, thank you again. Welcome back, class, to part 2 of the hotel case study with Lucas Heater here from Collier's Valuation. Again, Lucas, thanks a lot for taking our class through this, and I hope they get a lot of pointers and your expertise. So here's the class with you, and take it away.
Thanks, David. Okay. So as I understand, you've already had a brief introduction to report front half items dealing with site, the sites, the improvements, maybe area analysis. Obviously, area analysis is going to deal with your broader market specifics that might, you know, a high level stuff. Local area is going to deal with pertaining to hospitality products or properties, how that, what are the influences that might affect the property. Same thing with site and improvements. That's just going to detail, and it provides a basis for, hey, is there anything strange about the site? Are there access considerations that, you know, the property, yeah, it's in a good market, but nobody can see it. It's off the main street, or the improvements are situated in such a way that they don't garner the best exposure. So being that you've apparently already had some exposure to that, I won't necessarily focus on that information for this particular property. However, I do want to start in the assessment and taxation section, real estate appraisal in general, but particularly for hospitality, you really have to look closely at the assessment and how that's going to affect your valuation. The reason being is that most often you're looking at properties that may only be assessed. Your market value, say you come in at a value of $20 million for a property. Well, so often, especially in Florida, you're looking at assessments that might be 30 or 40% of your market value, when in reality, Florida law dictates that properties can technically be assessed for up to 70% of value. So, I'm sorry, up to 100% of value. So the problem is, if you don't account for that, you're going to have one of your expenses is going to be significantly off. So how we look at that is, state of Florida, taxes are due on November 30th. You get a 4%